The purpose, you say the purpose of the internal audit activity is to provide independent, objective assurance consulting services to add value to improve the organization's operations. And how it does that is by adopting a very systematic, disciplined approach to evaluating and improving the effectiveness of governance, risk management, and controls. Yes, as per the standards, assurance service involves internal auditors' objective assessment of evidence. So when we carry out our field work, and when people tell us various things, provide explanations, when we look at documentation, audit documents, it can be invoices, it can be payment vouchers, receipts, contracts. We must assess those objectively. Objective assessment of evidence is very, very important. If we only objectively assess without taking sides in a very unbiased manner, then only we can come to the right opinion or conclusion regarding the function, process, or whatever. Right? So what is an assurance service? So they say the IIA glossary defines an assurance service as an objective examination of evidence for the purpose of providing an independent assessment on GRC processes. So assurance is all about, if you want to provide proper assurance services, you must be independent, you must be objective. You must objectively prepare your scope, objectively carry out your work, objectively assess the evidence, objectively draft your observations, objectively rate your observations, the risk ratings, and then provide your objectively give an assessment on the governance, risk management, and control processes of an organization. So exam might ask you the definition of assurance services. So you look for the word objective, independent assessment. Can you see the word independent? And you assess GRC processes. The nature and scope. The nature and scope of an assurance. So what is an assurance engagement? So assurance engagement, like an external audit or an internal audit, right, has three parties. If you take the external audit of a company, external audit is an assurance engagement. External audit is an assurance engagement. So there are certain features of an assurance engagement. Features. What are those features? One is there is a three-party relationship. Can you tell me who are the three parties? They say if you are doing an assurance engagement, parties do not involve. Three parties. Who are the three parties? If it's an external audit, who are the three parties? External audit is an example of an assurance engagement. An external audit, who are the three parties? The shareholder, the auditor, and the management. The management prepares the financials and gives it to the auditor for his opinion. And the opinion is not given back to the management, it's given to the shareholders. So the users are the shareholders. The preparers are the management. And the evaluator or the practitioner is the auditor. Similarly, an internal audit is also an assurance engagement because we evaluate the process owners is the person who gives internal auditor. We have one party and then our report goes to the directors. There are three parties there. The management, the process owner, or the management whose work we evaluate. Then we are the internal auditor, second party. And the third, and our report goes not to the management. Ultimately, it's addressed to whom? Chairman of the audit committee. So, right, the answer that is given here is correct. Auditor, shareholder, and the management. Assurance services. So there are various types of assurance services. Now, if you take a external audit, we mainly focus on the financial statements. And we give an opinion as to whether the financial statements and the notes, balance sheet, income statement, cash flow, equity, give a true and fair view, right? A true and fair view of the financial performance and position of the company. That's what an external audit is. We tell these financial statements have been prepared according to the applicable financial reporting framework. In Sri Lanka, that is SLFRS and LKS. The auditor goes on to say these financial statements are free from material misstatements, whether due to fraud or error. Now, internal audit is something else. Internal audit focuses on what? Adding value, improving operations, improving GRC processes. That's what we focus on. We not only focus on control, we focus on governance and risk management as well. So consulting services are advisory in nature. Now, if you take a consulting service, if an internal audit is providing consulting service, here there are only two parties. Consulting service is not an assurance engagement. Assurance engagement has three parties. Consulting, if auditor is providing consulting services, there are only two parties, the auditor and the management. That's all. Our report is given to the management. We don't give it to the director. The management wants something done, we give it to the manager. So that's a small difference between assurance and consulting, where assurance, we evaluate something and give something to a third party. In consulting, we directly give the management tells us, can you evaluate the internal controls in an ERP before implementation? So we do that and give it to the management. That's consulting, two parties. That's a small difference there. Here, the IIA glossary defines consulting services as activities intended to add value and improve an organization's GRC. Yes. So there we don't give assurance. We just make recommendations on how to improve governance processes, how to improve risk management processes, how to improve control. Now, when we do the internal audit also, we do that, no? So really speaking, internal audit is a mixture, no? We provide assurance and we provide consulting also, because we give recommendations to improve governance, risk management, and control processes. So ideally, it's kind of a mixture, right? Though you try to put it into two buckets or two categories. Authority here. Now, when we do an audit, the support of the management and the board is crucial. There are conflicts. Sometimes management has conflicts with the auditor. We can't give this, we can't do that. But if you have this authority that is given to you through the internal audit charter, if you have that document where you have access to all records, all people, sometimes when we do audit, they say, don't speak to that one, don't speak to this one, come and speak to me. No. You have access rights to go and speak to every person. Of course, it has to be within the scope of, okay? Any physical property, you go to do an audit and they don't open a drawer which you want, that's a problem. They have to open. A formal charter for the internal audit activity that defines internal audit activity. So we have an internal audit charter, which we spoke about earlier, and this charter, this charter at the end of the day documents what? It documents the purpose of internal audit, the authority of internal audit, and the responsibility of internal audit. Now look at the responsibility. The internal audit activity responsibility is to provide assurance and consulting services. So it's the same thing. Responsibility and the purpose is more or less the same. So we include the definition in the internal audit charter under these three categories: the purpose, authority, and responsibility. You will see those 3 points in the internal audit charter of an organization, right? Then reasons for the codes of ethical conduct. Now the next aspect that we are going to talk about is the code of ethics. Right? That's a huge chapter. So now we have spoken about the PAR of the internal audit activity, the PAR, purpose, authority, and responsibility. And now we are going to the code of ethics. The primary purpose of a code of ethical conduct is to promote an ethical culture. Now, if I am a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, there is a code of ethics. I have to abide by that. Now, as internal auditors, if we are members or certification holders, we have to follow or comply with the requirements in the code of ethics. The code of ethics enables the internal auditors to, promote ethical culture. If you have internal department, you say, okay, all my auditors must follow the code of ethics of the IIA. So that will ensure that they are very ethical. It will create a very ethical culture in the department. Why do you need? What is the function of a code of ethics? Function. This also could be an MCQ. What is the purpose or function of a code of ethics? Right. So at the exam now my job here by conducting these classes is more than teaching you the theoretical stuff which you may already know, or you already feel if I read this, I can anyway get that knowledge. I don't need to really follow it. That is correct. 99.9% correct. But my main task is to tell you how you might be tested. Right? I have to highlight those keywords to you so that when you are studying or going through these slides, you will focus on those words. Now, can you tell me what is the difference between A and B? A says the primary purpose of a code of ethics. Primary purpose of code of ethics is to what? Promote an ethical culture among internal auditors. MCQ asks you about a primary purpose, promote ethical. But if they ask you functions of a code of ethics, functions, then you have to specify 1, 2, and 3. Promote what are the good values to all members in the company. Promote values to people who are outside the company. If some companies have a code of ethics, they tell, now let's forget about the IIA code of ethics. Let's look at a code of ethics of a company, which you and I know. You might be working for a company which has a code of ethics. What does a code of ethics do? It tells the employees, these are the values we treasure. Then sometimes the code of ethics is published on the website. Then it tells our suppliers, customers, it communicates the values of the organization to outsiders. It communicates the values of organization to people within the company, employees. And it establishes standards, behavioral standards against which you can measure their performance. Code of ethics tells you this is how you have to behave. If you don't behave properly, then what you can do is you can evaluate. Like I said, to see if you want to see whether the internal audit has properly carried out the internal audit, compare what they have done with the standards, technical standards, performance standards, and attribute standards. Similarly, if you want to measure the performance of individuals in terms of how they have behaved, individuals can measure their own performance, right? Then you can look at the code of ethics as a set of standards, the benchmark. So if someone wants to evaluate your behavior, you can use the code of ethics as the standard that you should need to maintain. So those are the functions, 3 functions. Then you have aspects of the code of ethics. The code of ethics, the mere existence of a code of ethics does not ensure that its principles are followed, or that those outside the organization will believe that it is trustworthy. A measure of cohesion and professionalism when organization is the degree of voluntary compliance with its adopted code. Code of ethical conduct worded so as to reduce the likelihood of members being sued for substandard work would earn right. So what are they saying here basically? What they are saying here is the voluntary compliance is important. That is, if there is a code of ethics, you must voluntarily comply with it. You have to comply with it anyway. There is no voluntary, it's mandatory compliance. But you must think. You don't let them force it on you. You comply, you read it and you comply with the code. That is important. If you don't comply with the code, if there are violations, there must be provisions to enforce the code. Take disciplinary action. Enforcement is a very important component of implementation. If you have a code of ethics and if there are violations and you don't really and all, take a very, what you call a lenient attitude. But no, you have to enforce it. Disciplinary action must be taken, right? So try and voluntarily comply with these codes. Don't wait for the company to tell you, there is something like this, you are not doing it. Enforce it upon you. And the other thing is, if you have ethical code, the chances of the internal auditors being sued for substandard work will reduce. Because the code of ethics will tell you what? It will tell you, be objective, maintain confidentiality, maintain your technical standards, be competent. maintain very high levels of integrity. So if you maintain those 4 pillars of the code of ethics, then most likely you will do your work well, right? If you're not competent, substandard work product. If you don't maintain integrity, no trust in the auditor. If you violate confidentiality, no one will trust you. And then if you are not objective, no point. So having a good code of ethics reduces the chances of the auditor being sued, right? So therefore the public trust, because we must understand external auditors have, of course, a bigger role when it comes to external audits, because the public people have faith in you. There's public trust. You're doing a public service. Similarly, internal auditors also today are doing a kind of a public service, because what we do goes beyond the director board. Even shareholders will look to us to highlight if there are any weaknesses or frauds, to highlight those. Otherwise, they will, the trust in internal auditors will gradually diminish or get eroded. So what are the four components here? Look at this. Typical components of a code of ethical conduct. What are the 4 components? Can you go through this? So the code of ethics has 4 components. Integrity. A refusal to compromise values. You don't compromise your values. Another facet of integrity is performance of professional duties according to the law. So basically, integrity is about being honest. It's about complying with the laws of the land. It's about doing your audit according to the auditing standards. That is integrity. What is objectivity? Objectivity is about commitment to providing stakeholders with unbiased information. Doing an audit and providing a report, it must be unbiased. Then you must be independent from conflicts of interest. You can't be, as an auditor, you cannot have conflicts of interest. You are going to audit the procurement department, your sister is there. Then you must come out of the audit and get someone else to do the audit. So objectivity at the exam, look for the word conflict of interest, look for the word unbiased mental attitude, unbiased mental state. Confidentiality is what? Confidentiality, during the audit, you gain a lot of information. Sensitive information about strategic plans, formulas, future plans. All this must be held in confidence. If you don't hold it in confidence and if you disclose it, then people will lose trust. This confidentiality is very, very important. 4th is a commitment to competence. That means today you will qualify, but maintain your level of competence. If you are an expert in financial audits and you are told to do an IS audit, you have to say, I don't know how to do it. If you have qualified as a chartered accountant 10 years ago, and now the accounting standards have changed, then you are expected to do CPD, continuous professional development, and maintain your technical standards. You have to maintain your standards. That's very, very important, right? So at the exam, you might be asked, what are the components, the 4 fundamental principles of the code of ethics: integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and competence. So there are 2 with the letter C, confidentiality, competence, and the other 2 are I and O. These 4 elements are the core principles. So these are the fundamental principles of the code of ethics, the core principles, fundamental principles, the 4 elements. You asked that way, you have to mention these. All right. The provisions of the code are applied broadly to all organizations and persons who perform internal audits. So generally what they say is, if you are a member of the IIA, and if you are a certified internal auditor, then, or if you are performing internal audit, this code of ethics is applicable. Not really. You have to be a member of the institute. No, I'm a member of the institute, chartered accountants. So if I violate the institute's code, they can go after me and take action. Since I'm a member, if I'm a member of SEMA, Chartered Institute can't take action. So you have to be, unless of course your department has adopted the code. Sometimes there may be no CIAs or certified or members. All the staff in the department of internal audit could be just non-certification holders or non-members. But you may decide to follow the IIA standards. Your code of your internal audit charter may say all auditors in the department must follow the IIA's code of ethics. In that case, then it's applicable. It's applicable. Core principles, the rules of conduct in the code are organized based on principles. So you have these rules of conduct, right? These are the principles: integrity, objectivity, competence, and then under competence, you have these rules of, you have something called rules of conduct. Under integrity, there is 1.1 rules of conduct. Under objectivity also, there are rules of conduct. And under confidentiality also, there are rules of conduct. And under competence also, there are rules of conduct. Can you see? There might be a little bit of a overlap here. So we'll go through it. We'll go through the main areas. So we did this. So we know what the core principles are. Then this we can avoid. Principles. The integrity of internal auditors establishes trust, and thus provides the basis for reliance on their judgment. So the MCQ could come like, what is the component or the core principle in the code of ethics that establishes trust and then place reliance on the internal auditor's judgment is integrity. So integrity seems to be the most important element related to trust, integrity. Right? So if you see the word trust anywhere, look for the word integrity. Because without integrity, no one will trust the internal auditor. Objectivity, let's look at that. Internal auditors exhibit the highest level of professional objectivity. Objectivity has to be exhibited or displayed, not only when you form the scope, but also when you gather evidence, when you evaluate evidence, when you communicate information. So all the steps along the way, you have to display highest levels of objectivity. This is very, very important, right? Internal auditors make a balanced assessment of all the relevant circumstances and are not duly influenced by their own interest or by others in forming judgments. So we have to make a lot of professional judgments about what audit steps to procedures to carry out, what should be the sample size, how to interpret the evidence, how to risk rate the observations, what would be the impact of the observation, what sort of recommendation should you give. So in all those, you must be objective. You must be objective, and you must not be influenced by the interests of others or by your own interest. Right? You want a promotion, so you wait without, you downgrade the risk. Can't do that. Confidentiality. Internal auditors respect the value and ownership of information they receive. So you receive a lot of respect that information in terms of, not disclosing it to others. The value and ownership of information. So if they have an MCQ, they might ask you something like this. What fundamental principle in the code of ethics is related to an auditor valuing the ownership, respecting the value and ownership of information they gather in an assignment. So that is confidentiality. That is the core principle, right? You can disclose that information with appropriate authority. Now, if a court of law tells you to disclose it, you disclose it. Right? If the Financial Intelligence Unit of Sri Lanka wanted to disclose something, you have to disclose it. Any other confidentiality agreement, even in your employment contract, is the government FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit, the FTRA Act, Financial Transfer Reporting Act, says you're protected. If there is some anti-money laundering, some ha-ho going on in your company, and you're wondering whether to tell the Financial Intelligence Unit, there's something wrong. No, you can't just go and disclose. There has to be a reason of a disclosure. So the people, when they carry out their work as auditors or accountants, come across situations where they suspect anti-money laundering, for example, or a fraud. So in such cases, especially anti-money laundering, where there's a law in the country, Prevention of Money Laundering Act of 2006. Now, there is a clause in the FTRA, Financial Transactions Reporting Act, where they say if the employee comes to the financial intelligence unit and discloses something, right, like the company is doing something criminal, then they are protected. The company cannot sue them for breach of the confidentiality clause in the agreement that overrides. Things like that, right? You have to be very, very careful. Then you have competence. Competency, interlocutors apply the knowledge, skills, and experience needed. So when they talk about which core principle in the code of ethics looks at the knowledge, skills, and experience, then they are looking at competency. If you are carrying out an internal audit, you must be knowledgeable, you must be skilled, and you must be experienced, right? And the second thing that I want to talk about is about these rules of conduct. Give me a second, I'll just try to minimize this. Right. So rules of conduct under each of these pillars, right? Starting with integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, and competence. I think there is a repeat here which I have to delete, right? Yeah, this is about objectivity, confidentiality, competence, chart, right? Okay, fine. So here what we are going to now learn about is under each of these sections, right? There are things called, you have the core principle, which is the main heading, integrity, competence, and all that, those four. Under those four, there are rules of conduct. And this is important for you to understand the rules. So can you read under integrity? We say interlocutors must do these things. So can you just go through these 4 points under the rules of conduct under integrity? Just run through them. So they say, how does an internal auditor display integrity? They must perform their work honestly, diligently, hard work, and with responsibility. They must observe the law and make disclosures expected by the law and the profession. Sometimes we have this regulation called NOCLA, CLAR. According to that, if a company breaks the laws, the accountant must first inform the management. If they don't do anything about it, then they must inform the directors. If the directors also don't do anything about it, they can go to the regulator, right? So shall observe the law and make disclosures. Sometimes certain kind of violations you have to inform the Security Exchange Commission, right? Those sort of things we have to do. If we are supposed to do it as per the law. Shall not knowingly be a party to any illegal activity, right? That will bring the profession into discredit, or shall respect and contribute to the legitimate and ethical objectives of the organization. So how the MCQ will be drafted from this is, they might ask you a question like, there is a guy called Peter, and Peter has done something which has brought the entire profession into disrepute. What is the core principle that he has violated? Integrity. Or Peter has carried out an illegal act. What is the core principle that is violated? Or Peter is dishonest person, does not carry out his work diligently. Or Peter is doing illegal stuff. So, and or the company is doing illegal things, and Peter is helping them to do those illegal things or unethical things. Because internal auditors must not do illegitimate, look at 1.4, or unethical objectives of an organization. If you are working in an organization as an internal auditor, you must do contribute towards the legitimate and ethical objectives of the organization. Help the organization achieve its legitimate and ethical objectives, not unethical and illegitimate objectives. Right? Sometimes there might be a question like, there is a wastage being put, and this is illegal according to the Central Environmental Authority regulations, and then the auditor does not report this and hide it so that the company can go on doing this illegal thing. So then his integrity is questionable. He has violated integrity. Now let's look at the next one. Objectivity. What is it to be objective? Can you go through that? Objective. Now this we learned a little bit about this. What is it? They say internal auditors shall not participate in any activity or relationship that may impair their unbiased assessment. Sometimes you may go for an audit, and then in the evening you might go for a party with the management, and then people might think, this getting together, the social activity in the evenings will sometimes impair his objectivity. I mean, he might not put any harsh or high-risk observations in the report because now they are friends. Or the auditor may go out with the management for dinners and all that, but might still be very objective and not be biased. But anyway, people might presume. You see, they might assume because sometimes there is actual impairment and there is the perception of impairment. No? So the auditor must not participate in any activity or a relationship, or get like you're the chief internal auditor and you have an affair with someone in the finance department. So when you do the finance department audit, I mean, you're in a relationship which may impair or presume to impair your unbiased assessments. How you do so, you might give a good assessment for that finance function when you audit it. So don't get into a situation where your objectivity is impaired, and that may be impaired due to some activity that you do or because of some relationship you are in. Shall not accept anything, that is accepting gifts. Right? If you go for an audit, I mean, if you get a compliment to something, then it's okay. Complimentary is of minimal value. But if you get a laptop when you go to do an audit, they give the auditor a laptop. Now that is given in, they expect something in return for that. So you must not accept anything that may impair your professional judgment or may impair your unbiased assessment. So that also you will be careful about accepting gifts. The general thing is you can accept gifts of a minimal value. Then the next one is shall disclose all material facts known to them that if not disclosed may distort the reporting. Right? So whatever you do, you must be objective, means when you are reporting, report all the observations. Don't hide it. Otherwise, you'll be distorting the meaning. No? All material facts must be disclosed. Right? So let's move on to confidentiality and look at the rules of conduct there. What is confidential? Shall be prudent in the use and protection of information acquired in the course of their duties. That is, when you do your audit, you will acquire a lot of information. Be careful when you use it. Don't just distribute it to everyone. Don't disclose it in an unauthorized manner. Make sure that you keep it password protected, or access to those sensitive material is limited. Don't just share your working paper files in office with everyone. So be careful. Shall not use information for any personal gain. Sometimes you might be auditing a company and you might have shares in that company, and then something you might get to know about a merger going to take place, or the company going to acquire another competitor, and you go and buy shares in that competitor. So you used inside information for a personal gain. Don't do that. You violate. No? Then you have rules of conduct for competency. Can you go through that? You can be asked questions, CQ questions. They don't ask directly. They will not ask you what is competence. They will put it in the story. So here it says we must engage only in those services where we have necessary competence. So they tell you to do an IS audit and you have no experience in carrying out IS audit, then don't do it. You shall perform internal audit services in accordance with the standards. Can you see that? So if you do not perform your audits according to the internal audit standards, then you're incompetent. So they may have a question like, you're doing a Peter is doing an audit and is not done according to the internal audit standard. What is the core principle that has been violated? Then the thing what is violated is competence. Shall continually improve. That is CPD. This CPD. You have to maintain your knowledge. You maintain your knowledge. So this is again, we went through this. We can skip this. This we can go through. Integrity is the foundation of the other three principles. So integrity seems to be the most important one. And that is like the foundational principle. And on that only objectivity, confidentiality, and competency is built. So this is the most important pillar. The chief audit executive's responsibility for implementing integrity includes. Now, chief audit executive is the head of the department. He must ensure that all his staff act with the highest level of integrity. So what should he do? How can he cultivate a department, cultivate integrity among the internal auditors in his department? So see, the CAE should cultivate a culture of integrity by acting with integrity. So the CAE must be a role model. He must act with integrity. He must abide by or comply with the code of ethics. The CAE also establishes policies and procedures to guide the internal audit activity. That is, if you are the head of the department, you must have an SOP. Every department has one. Procurement has, finance has, inventory department, supply chain will have. So why shouldn't your department? So your department also must have a procedure manual which sets out how to carry out the audit. If you have that, then the staff will follow it. Because otherwise, they will not know how to. Because if you don't do the audit according to the standards, you are incompetent. You're not following the code of ethics. So then there must be guidance on how to do this audit according to the standards. So for that, policies and procedures must be there to guide the internal audit activity. So if you have that sort of guidance in the form of a standing operating procedure manual, then what happens is the staff are better equipped to comply with the competence principle. Competence principle states very clearly that you have to do the audit according to the standards. The CAE may also emphasize the importance of integrity by providing training. Yes. So training sessions, awareness sessions, not only on integrity, but also on the code of ethics. At onboarding and constantly, periodically having refresher sessions. Those are very, very important. For internal auditors, the best attempts to identify and measure integrity likely involve astute awareness and understanding the code of ethics. So if there is a code of ethics for the internal auditors, then they must sign off on it. All auditors must say they have read it, understood it, and sign off on it. And if there are violations, it must be enforced. So the last section for today is for internal auditors' behavior that may not be illegal, but may be discreditable. So some things that auditors do, they are not illegal, but they could be unethical. Everything unethical is not illegal. Unethical things can be legal within the legal realm. If something is illegal, it's clearly unethical. But there are certain things within the legal realm which could be unethical, right? Behavior that may be considered bullying, harassing, discriminatory, sexual harassing, bullying people, failing to accept responsibility. When you're doing an audit, you don't accept responsibility. You say, this is not my problem. Issuing false reports, lying, making claims about one's competency. You say that, when you go for an interview, you can do treasury audit, you can do this, that, but actually you can't. Making disparaging comments. If you're in an organization, you don't like your job, you don't like your boss, then leave. Don't talk about it, you just leave if you're not happy with it. If something illegal has been done or there's some sort of harassment, then you can use the appropriate grievance channels to complain, but don't, make statements in the corridors and just, bring the entire profession into discredit or send emails here and there. There are proper channels that you can use to air those grievances, use those. Minimizing, concealing, or omitting observations. Obviously, can't minimize, conceal, or omit observations. Or ratings. Non-compliance with the standards and other IPPF mandatory guidance. So those are also not good. Performing internal services for which one is not competent. Performing internal service with undeclared impairments. Yeah, so you're doing an internal audit of the Treasury Department, you are totally incompetent. You don't have the skills to do it. Or there is an independent issue, or you have some relation in that department, but you don't disclose it. You don't disclose it. You must disclose. Soliciting or disclosing confidential information. You give confidential information about this company to one of your other partners, or you pass it on to a competitor, or you disclose it to your family members. Those are not right. Stating that the internal audit activity is operating in conformance with the standards. Sometimes when you do quality assurance reviews, you say your department is following the internal audit standards when conforming with the internal audit standards, when it is actually not conforming. That's a lie, Overlooking illegal activities. Yeah, so if the organization is carrying out illegal activities, don't be a part of those. Don't condone it. Don't tolerate it. Using the CIA designation after they have been expired or been revoked. Using the CIA designation. Now, CIA also you have to maintain your CPD and all that. So, you have to ensure that it is expired or revoked, you don't use it. So, with that, we will stop for today. We have a few more slides. What we will do is we will go through those. Some of them we have already repeated. And there are two areas where they talk about impairments to objectivity and impairments to dependence. We'll look at that. And then the final section would be internal audit charter, which we have already covered to some extent. But at the end of this, and then you have the internal audit glossary, which you can go through at leisure. So we have about 10 slides to cover. We will cover those slides next week. So do you have any questions that you would like to ask? Not, you can stop for today. I will have this presentation distributed to you all by Monday. Don't worry. So there is one message. Will you be sharing the presentation? Yes, Rushley. I will be sharing this presentation. You'll get it by Monday. If there are no questions, we will close it for today. Thank you for participating and have a great weekend.